amazed by the fact that, you can have a Sunday lunch, and if it's a really bad meal, you don't really remember it. If someone cooks up an absolute storm, you always seem to sort of walk away, and you can picture that moment where you sat around with your friends, amazing food, amazing wine. And I sort of realized that, the senses are the main things that allow us to interact with the world around us. So after about 5 years of working at Sipsmith and shaking cocktails and having a lot of fun, I had a meeting right next to my family offices in Hertfordshire, and my dad, my grandpa, even my dog was there. Felt like a little bit of a setup. They were like, look, why don't you come and join the family lighting company? So I sort of joined Phos, or at the time Ecoled, and I was going around and doing sort of CPDs and learning a lot about light, and I had no idea just how much of an impact light has on pretty much everything that we do. So during lockdown, we had something called the Light Tribe, which myself, my brother, and a good friend of mine called Dr. Shelley James sort of started. We were talking about the way that light affects human behavior, and it just blew my mind. And then sort of over the last 2-3 years, I've been sort of learning more, putting it into pamphlets, probably spamming a load of your emails, so apologies for that as well, but put it eventually into a book, which was completed 2 weeks ago, so hoping that will be available next year. But yeah, it's all about biophilic design and the neuroscience of light. So biophilic design is a bit of a trigger word at the moment. A lot of people see it as sort of a hot topic, and people think it's pretty much putting plants inside your living room and suddenly you're living your best life. There's a bit more of it, more to it than that. And a lot of it is to do with the neuroscience. So just to give you a little bit of an overview on who we are and why we're sort of able to talk about this. So Phos is actually an architectural lighting manufacturer. We do all kinds of different stuff. A few of our products are here. This will probably some housekeeping as well. So this will go on for about 45 minutes to an hour. If anyone needs to leave early, I completely understand. I know this is sort of slightly gone over the 12:30 start time, but we had to get some drinks and nibbles in. Bathrooms are just through those back doors to the right, if anyone needs that. And then after the talk, we'll do a little tour, show you the downstairs area, and you can sort of have a look at what we do. But we sort of do architectural downlights, uplights, wall lights, track lights, LED strip, available in small, medium, and large. So we hope we can do, as our sales director says, any circle or any line on your drawings. But we've got quite an interesting history. So it's actually my great-great-grandpa that started the company in 1883. We started manufacturing things like Spitfire aeroplanes, and then got into making Rolls-Royce engines. And when LEDs first came around, instead of putting them into sort of large halogen fittings, we used all our engineering heritage to harness how small the LED is. So our intention from the very beginning is to make tiny fittings that vanish into the space, and also have, incredible color rendering and lots of different finishes and stuff as well. So during this journey, I realized that we are actually very biophilic, and I learned more about it, and I'll sort of explain a little bit later on about how that ties in with the rest of it. So there's 3 sections to this presentation. First is what is biophilic design, good to start there. Then we have why we need to design biophilically, with a little bit of a sort of focus on artificial light. And then we have how to design biophilically. So hopefully it will give you an understanding of what it is, how we evolved to see the world around us, and then how in reality we should design spaces to make sure we live better, learn better, heal faster, and all that kind of stuff. So biophilic design was created in the 70s by a man called Fromm. The concept is, if you think about a phobia is something that you're scared of, whereas a philia is something that you love. So there was this argument that human beings have an innate love of all things biological. We evolved outside for billions of years in nature, and in the drop of a hat, very short period of time, we're now indoors in sort of artificial spaces. And there's a statement that says that we actually now put more consideration into zoos for animals than we do houses for humans. If you think about a polar bear, you think about the light, the temperature, the need to sleep and go to bed, and then wake up in the morning, the temperature, the climate, everything. Whereas the buildings we create for humans, fixed color temperatures, flat surfaces, which is never found in nature, and we're sort of moving away from what's organic. So biophilic design is just this sort of theory of how to start designing with a little bit more nature in mind. And as I sort of alluded to earlier, a lot of people think that's sort of putting cheese plants and all kinds of other foliage in your living room, but it's definitely not. This is a pretty amazing building in Cape Town where, I'm trying to remember exactly what it was. I think it was an old power station or something, but they cut into the cement, created these awesome sort of columns So there's not a plant in sight there, but the shapes, the textures, the natural light, the diffusion, the areas where you can sort of hide but also see in vast open areas is biophilic design. So I just thought I'd put this in there to sort of show you that it doesn't all have to be plants and stuff. So there's a big discussion about the way in which biophilic design can improve performance. So there's an amazing company called Terrapin, and they've got 15 principles of biophilic design, which we'll explore later on. And they were actually commissioned by Google to create their now infamous offices, where you walk down a corridor and there's a whiteboard on every wall, and you got sweets and a hands grab, and it's a crazy, crazy place. But when you look at a giant organization like Microsoft and Google and stuff like that, to improve the performance of a worker by 1% across thousands of employees is a pretty easy way to start driving your share price up. It makes your team work better and improve. So there's a performance formula that was made, which is essentially, if you look at the ability of someone to be able to do something, their motivation and their opportunity to do so, that's basically the three components of performance. So creating spaces that align with human biological needs, creating spaces where they feel calm to do that, and giving them the flexibility to align with their own individual needs allows that performance to go up. And you can kind of see this in a lot of different examples. So in offices, there was a big set of studies called the Hawthorne studies in the 70s, where it was basically a bit of a botched experiment where they looked at offices, and the outcome of they asked the question, what's the most important thing for workers to perform at their best? And the result was managers being pretty tough on them. It's not exactly what you want to hear. Now sort of loads of feedback has come to light and shown that that was complete nonsense. And it's actually about sort of worker coherence and calmness and making them happy. So to put that in perspective, there's another example in Sacramento Municipal Utility, a building in California, where all the office desks were facing sort of vertically. Everyone was looking at each other, basically. And there's this beautiful window with a view to nature outside. And the value of each desk was $1,999 when they're all staring at each other. When they tilted the desks and allowed the workers to look out of the window and allowed them to have haptic perception, which we'll talk about later, and feel calm and look at nature, the processing of each worker went up by 7%, which actually increased the value per desk from $1,999 to $3,999. So that dollars per desk. So you're doubling the value of each work person, which I think is a pretty huge example of just how much of a difference we can, how much performing at an optimal level comes as a result of just aligning with our biology. So in healthcare, stress bodies, they heal slower and more susceptible to infection. You look at nurses, stress nurses, particularly the NHS at the moment, working under blue light with very little flexibility or alignment for things that are natural, make more mistakes because you're tired and you're overworked and you're going against what your nature intends. They've had patients who have recovered from gallbladder surgery come out of hospital 24 hours earlier, just from designing biophilically. And then heart surgery patients, increased recovery times. I think it's about 36 hours they leave hospital. And there's a fact where I think the average amount of a cost of a hotel, of a hospital room in America is about $900 per person. So if you're getting one person out of hospital one day earlier, times that by the number of people having heart surgery over a year, it's a saving of about $942 million a year, just by giving us what we need. And it's super simple. And then the dementia and Alzheimer's we'll come into later. Retail and hospitality, so nature and shop fronts, people are more drawn to those shops. You got more of a chance if people are drawn to your shops of getting them in, cha-ching. Then the experience per square meter is the metric which a lot of people believe is now going to be the key indicator for retail spaces. So now more than ever, the high street is struggling. People need to be drawn to the experience of buying something instead of going online and getting it cheaper. So the experience and the comfort and the enjoyment of that space is now going to be a key metric in retail spaces. So how much people feel calm. Happy employees, people on the shop front, if they're happy, your customers are going to be happy, they're going to get a better experience, all that kind of stuff. So you're getting the idea by now. Hotels near water, 18% higher value per night. We understand financially that when houses are sold, if they're near to water or grasslands or a view, they're more valuable because deep down we understand that we need to be near nature. Biophilic hotel lobbies, they use 36% more, and they're the key places to start upselling snacks, drinks, food, all that kind of stuff. So there's a massive financial gain to come from it. Education, I'll whisk through these because I'm well aware that there's a list as long as your arm. If you remember all these, I'll be very impressed. So noise in schools has been found to drop by about 40%. So if you imagine children rushing around going absolutely bonkers, just basically chucking loads of bright blue light in them, it's not going to help them stay calm and focused. So by doing sort of calm biophilic design, you can get them to quieten down. Increased cognitive development, performance of memory and test scores improves. But then also, if children are at school and they're in a very nice natural environment, when they then start thinking about university, or at least their perception of the education system, if they remember that fondly as being happy and healthy and productive, then they're more likely to then go, oh, I'll do another 4 years and a master and a bachelor's at university or whatever it may be. So, it's important to try and get kids enjoying the spaces where they're learning. And then, residential, which I'm sure for a lot of people is a core part of their business, it's where you all go home every night to recover. So it's the main place, if anything, that you should be thinking about. What's your living room looking like? Your bedrooms, everything. How do you make it calm so that you can go and be the best version of yourself every morning? And then we were saying it, but homes and stuff are always more valuable nearer nature. So this for me is sort of the interesting part. This is my favorite pub facts about light and how we evolved to see the world around us and how essentially we should design biophilically. So to understand what we expect in the world around us, we have to start with the Big Bang. So it's where everything in this universe that we understand in this world came into existence. And it was about 700,000 years until the universe cooled down enough to allow light to travel to planet Earth. And eventually, when it landed on planet Earth, these little bacteria, called cyanobacteria, started photosynthesizing and they started creating oxygen. So that gave way to life on Earth. It allowed all these oxygen-breathing animals to start existing and living. And from the dawn of time, we have evolved to detect this light. So this is the evolution of the human eye. So in the top left, you've got the first ever retina. So these are really basic sensing panels, really, that allow light to land on them. And you can then tell whether it's daytime or nighttime. So plankton, krill, loads of small sea animals now still use this really basic system to be able to rise up or sink down in the water depending on what time of day it is. And that allows them to survive, protect against predators and all that kind of stuff. Then eventually someone mutated and created this sort of cone. And that allowed us to work out which direction light was coming from. The issue was we're underwater at this point. You've got things like leaves, twigs, branches floating around in the water. And if something falls in your eye, you're pretty stumped. You can't see anything. So one day there was a mutation and someone developed a lens, and that stopped people blinding themselves from just seeing. So that then allowed us to start focusing light on the back of the retina. We can then work out distance and sort of direction in a more efficient way. But then we get to these little fellas. I always think this guy looks quite mischievous. We started realizing there was a lot of food on land that was unchallenged. So all this stuff, everything had sort of been underwater, and eventually these things are called tetrapods. They started getting a bit of a taste for land life. So if you imagine we'd evolved for billions of years underwater using seawater to hydrate your eyes, we then started having to bring seawater with us. So all of you in this room with tear ducts, those tear ducts are creating seawater, which literally hydrates your eye. And it's for me, a bit of a nice blast to the past of the fact and a reminder of just how long our evolution outside has been. We've been underwater. We're all related to that guy. Sorry. The other reminder is if you look at the fins of these animals, which are still around today, you can see that the number of cartilage, the number of pieces of cartilage in their fins is exactly the same as the number of bones in your hands and arms. So we started having to, harden or calcify our cartilage to be able to stand up to the lower pressure outside, the higher gravity, because we're no longer in, floaty water. But we all came from there. And we sort of look at these creatures on the right as being quite simple. You look at insects with their funny little antennae, and we think, look, we're so much more advanced than them. But the retina has actually been described as an outgrowth of the brain. So this is our version of antenna, and we always forget that. When you actually look at what we're seeking out by growing these retinas out of our brain, it all goes back to the Big Bang. So this huge explosion, and all energy that we know in this universe came into existence. You've got radio waves on the left, which are slow, cumbersome waves which allow sort of Justin Bieber to travel across the land. And then we get microwaves, that are a bit more intense for cooking, infrared, little section in the middle, which is the visible light spectrum. And then you go all the way to gamma rays, which are pretty dangerous and horrible. So loads of creatures have evolved to see different things. Snakes have developed tongues that allow them to taste infrared. Bees, you may have seen David Attenborough's Life in Colour, where bees are able to see pollen and stuff on petals. But we've evolved to see this tiny little slither in the middle. And we kind of, I think, take colour for granted. Sound like a bit of a hippie, but colour is energy. When you look at the colour red and you go one tiny bit to the left, you get infrared, which we genuinely experience as heat. You go to violet and go one tiny bit to ultraviolet. They use ultraviolet to kill COVID. You may see the handrails on the underground where they have the blue light on the handrail. That's actually eliminating all kind of germs and stuff. But these are one tiny little bit of energy away from the colors that we experience. And when you think about how important those colors are and how much we sort of seek out color as an instructor to the world around us, it's now been estimated that 80% of our understanding of the world around us comes from what we see. So if you imagine the other 20% is every other sense that we have, suddenly puts in perspective how important light is. And this is why I started getting excited about it, because I just had no idea. So this graph here sort of shows the modern and primal brain in one go. This is about as heavy as we get, so don't worry, you can drink up if we're getting too into it. But when we were sort of, before we discovered fire, we had primal brains that were very, very small. Think about gorillas. They have to eat bamboo all day because it's so low in nutrients that they need to eat all day to be able to fill up their batteries to go and do their daily stuff. When we discovered fire, we were able to break down protein in such a way that we could absorb huge amounts of energy without having to forage all day. So we were able to sort of start, sitting down and communicating, strategizing, building tools, and basically developing a bit more of a creative brain. So we went from this tiny little pocket in the middle of this fight or flight ape brain and started growing into this part here, which is the frontal lobe. And that allowed us to start doing things like, executive and logical thinking and planning. And, we basically turned into the modern humans and that are all sort of in this room. What I find really interesting as well is, so toddlers tend, the expression toddlers throwing their toys out of the pram, quite fight or flight. They behave sort of quite apily. They'll get in a strop and they'll throw something or throw a tantrum. So toddlers, when they then grow up into teenagers then require a huge amount of sleep because they literally rewire their entire brain into their adult frontal lobes. The whole brain and neurological system changes to become adults. What I find interesting is that when you actually look at the way in which the primal brain still responds to the world around us, we still have all of these rules that have been inherited from our ancestors, passed through thousands and millions of years of evolution to give us expectations of how the world should be. So although when we turn into teenagers and we change our brain to be a bit more modern and logical, we still have these expectations of the world. And people like Apple, app developers, Microsoft, a lot of architects as well and designers use these 7 principles, and there's a few of them here, to design spaces. So these are things like we're able to understand when something's in front or behind an object. So the top left is called foreground, background. We have these basic understandings of the world around us, which your brains are computing. The middle, we got continuation, so the red dotted line going into the black one. Although the color changes, we know that path, that story continues. So think of a hotel corridor with multi-tones. We understand that the shape of it allows us to still just follow that curve around to the lobby or the pool or the bar. And then the top right, grouping. So you kind of get the idea. We have these embedded systems. If we go against them, it creates stress. Our apes start questioning what the hell is going on. So by trying to align with these, it makes the world sort of an easier place. And these are sort of 2 pathways which work out what and where things are. And objectively, we now know that if you throw them off we feel stress, we feel discomfort. So I was reading this the other day and it blew my mind. There's the part of your brain, the visual cortex, which is at the back of your brain, is shaped like a cone or a funnel. And in that funnel, you have neurons, millions and millions of neurons. They run all the way down. And there's sort of, I think it's as many neurons in 1 square inch of this area as there are stars in the entire Milky Way, which for me is mad. So it's the most complicated thing. And if you look at a simple object, say a flat surface or a simple table, it doesn't actually require that much processing. So see if you guys can see it over here as well. You can see a cone, right? So if you look at a simple object, it will only travel a tiny bit down the cone. So there aren't that many neurons that are stimulated. You don't get that much pleasure from stimulating those neurons. If you look at a really beautiful ornate door handle or a table that's made from a tree that's been felled, and you can still see all that beautiful bark and the knots in the wood, it requires a bit more dissecting. So it has to travel further down your visual cortex. It is objectively creating more pleasure within your mind. So when you now think about the fact that we create flat pack surfaces, everything's acrylic, we paint everything in brilliant white, which is the only color not found in nature, which is crazy. You start realizing that we have these expectations of the world. And the world, although it seems really complicated, is actually made up of law and order that governs everything. So if you look at everything from this leaf, although it looks like a completely randomly formed shape, there are sort of some genius mathematicians who have worked out that every cell relevant to the one next to it has some kind of continuation. So think of a lightning strike, for example. You have that one giant one that hits the ground, and next to it, loads of tiny little ones that come off. Those are all symmetrical to the main one. So again, if you're thinking about the way we dissect the world, the way we understand the world, there are ways in which you can repeat in finishes, in textures, in shapes to make sure that we feel familiar and we understand the space around us and feel calm, reduce stress, increase performance. So biophilic design is a huge subject. The more I learn about it, the more terrified I am of how much more I have to try and learn. But the focus obviously being in the Phos showroom, light, so natural lighting. And when you actually look at what natural light is, then you start to see just how important it is to try and replicate it in the built environment. So natural light can more or less be broken down into 5 different sections. You've got time, trying to replicate, the sun and the sky, like night and day. Intensity, so what brightness the light is in different places. Spectrum, so the quality of the color. Distribution, so whether you have giant blobs of shadow and then giant blobs of too much intense light. And flicker, which is the devil's work. So time and intensity. So circadian rhythms, term that gets thrown around a fair bit, and you may indirectly have seen your iPhones or your laptops dimming down from blue to red light in the evening, and they're doing it for a reason. So a little while ago, Professor Russell Foster discovered this tiny layer behind your eye, which had these cells that respond to blue wavelengths. And when he actually put that to an American society of scientists, they all ridiculed him because they said, how could you possibly have found something in the eye that none of us have seen over hundreds of years of trying to understand how the eye works? But it's a microscopic layer of these cells that when blue light hits it, it tells your body to start creating cortisol. So the reason this happens is because we evolved for so many years outside in the natural world, when the sun rose into the atmosphere would glow, and the blue light coming from the atmosphere hitting our eye would indicate to our body that it's daytime. So it would instruct our body to wake up, create cortisol, which is the stress hormone, almost like an engine starting at the beginning of a day. The key turns on with this cortisol, blood pressure goes up, heart rate goes up, and we go straight into action. When the sun then sets, that blue light disappears and our body gets a signal that the sun has set, another nighttime has come, it's time to relax. So we create melatonin, start resting and repairing, carrying out vital cellular repair and all that kind of stuff. The issue is that in this modern world, and we'll look at this later, LEDs are just blue lights. There's never any change in intensity of time and day. And as a result, last thing at night, we're being blasted with bright blue Stasi interrogation light, and your body is being told it's time to wake up. So this is completely against your biological requirements. And the World Health Organization now has declared night shift work, working under blue light at night, as carcinogenic, as cancerous. Sorry to sling that out on a Thursday. You've got 65% increase in type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease. And it's all because your body is being blasted with this blue light that is telling you to wake up when over billions of years you should really be sleeping. To give you another idea of how long we've been around, so if you stretch your arms out like that, on one side, when my fingers are waggling, that's the Big Bang. If you took a nail file on my right big finger and went like that, that's how long humans have been around. And every other part of that, we've been outside existing in natural light. In the space of a really short period of time, we now make a lot of plastic, brilliant white, flat surfaces, and it's completely against our nature, and it's having real physical effects. So there's a theory that sort of 10 a.m. we have our highest awareness, 3 p.m. we have biggest drop of awareness, but actually every single individual has their own chronotype or body clock. And this blows my mind as well. Back in the day, evolution found a way of, when we were in a tribe, we would need to protect ourselves from predators. So this is where I ask you if you're a dolphin, a wolf, a lion, or a bear. These are 4 chronotypes or body clocks that have been based on sleeping patterns of different animals. And when we were in a tribe, people were born with different body clocks so that they would have a natural, can you see okay? Make sure my head's not in the way. To make sure that we were awake for a maximum part of the day, so that, if I was an early bird, I'd be awake when an evening lark, someone that, is better at nighttime, is still asleep, so I can look around for potential threats. I always like this because everyone's like, I think I'm a bear, I think I'm a dolphin. So again, it's quite an interesting thing. So we recently did a project at the Microsoft head offices, where we did tunable white lighting over every single desk. And again, I'm talking about Apple, Google, Microsoft. They get the difference that performance can make from just giving people what they need. So by giving each individual the ability to take that blue light out when they need it taken out, when they need to wind down, introduce blue light when they need a little bit of extra help, that kind of stuff, it allows you to perform better. And just to give you an idea of, they're now starting to personalize medical care around individuals' chronotypes or body clocks. So this is an anti-bowel cancer treatment, which when given in the morning for most subjects is one of the most poisonous things you can give them. In the evening, it's one of the most effective and has barely any side effects. So your body changes dramatically throughout the day. Dementia and Alzheimer's patients, they've done studies now where with 2 separate test groups in Amsterdam, one hospital had no tunable white lighting, the other one had a lot. And by aligning with the natural sleep cycles of patients in these care homes, they didn't have that primal brainstem lashing out and feeling like something was abnormal. They were waking up more naturally, they were going to bed more naturally, the staff were a lot happier because they didn't have to go against these people's natural instincts. And the mental degeneration slowed by something like 35% over a 2-year period, which is huge. And it's all about just aligning with your biology, and it's just light. We've literally seeked out for billions of years how to understand the world around us. And that 80% number at the beginning sounded quite big, but hopefully you guys are sort of seeing just what I started seeing. Radiation therapy, you get significantly more hair loss if you have radiation therapy in the morning than in the afternoon. So you kind of get the idea now. It's a bit more of a fun one. Sport. So tennis players will have their fastest first serve in the morning, but the more accurate in the afternoon. Schedule your games accordingly. Then more number of athletics records have been, world records of athletics, more of them have been done in the afternoon or late evening just because of the way the body relaxes. And it's all to do with light. So, if we're talking about spectrum, white light, when it hits a raindrop, because blue as a wavelength is very high frequency, it punches through that raindrop a lot easier than red, which is longer and gets bent a lot more. So that's why you end up with this spread of all these different colors. So if you take a spectrometer, I can never say that word right, so I'm quite happy right now. and you measure full spectrum natural light, you get this beautiful arc of violet all the way to the color red. Then you look at an ordinary LED, it's completely different. So an LED is a little blue crystal, a diode, light-emitting diode, and it was very efficient. I think it was the person that invented it, I forget his name, a Japanese guy, won the Nobel Prize for it. And we suddenly realized with the growing population and cost of energy, we were like, oh, amazing, we've got this new light, let's go. Everything turned into LED overnight. And what it is a tiny blue crystal that gives you this huge pump in blue, and then you put a phosphor over it that just sort of makes it a little bit more normal or natural to the human eye. But when you measure it, you get huge drops in the color red, indigo, that black arc. You can see the blue, there's significantly more blue than the body actually needs. And then when you start thinking about color and how that reacts with us, or how we see color, color is the wavelengths that are rejected in the world around us. So a green leaf appears green because all the white light from the sun goes onto the leaf and just the green wavelength bounces off into our eyes. So we perceive it as being green. Look at the color red, exactly the same. But when you picture an LED, you've got this huge spike of blue, barely any red. So all the reds and oranges and woods and these warm natural colors that generally calm us down aren't visible. We've removed them. We can no longer see these red colors. With poor quality LED, you remove, if you spend £45,000 on a brand new kitchen refit, and you've chosen the color of your tiles, your wooden tables and all of that, and you put in an LED light bulb that's just got blue light, what's the point? There is, you're removing all of these wavelengths. And the difference is that, you get more joy out of an image that's vibrant on the right with great color rendering and all the natural sunlight. And then on the left, you've got this sort of grayscale, slightly colder looking space. So this is fact that basically got me into this whole line of intrigue. Dave, our sales director, told me this. It's, I think, my favorite fact. So this is Baker Miller Pink. A few of you may have heard of this. It's a semi-famous color. It's been in Mindhunter, if anyone's seen that on Netflix. It's okay. 3 episodes in, you get this. You can probably cut it there. But this is named Baker Miller Pink after 2 American naval officers who were called Baker and Miller. And some experiments on mice back in the 70s, they've subjected mice to this color pink. And they basically got really lazy. They wouldn't really move. They were eating a lot. Didn't really fancy doing much. And this scientist had an idea of painting the cadet base and a naval base in the canteen area where the largely testosterone-fueled, lively naval cadets were all having their meals. They painted it in this pink, and everyone basically, they just calmed down. They subdued, less aggression, just a lot nicer to everyone. And then they did later studies and worked out that this color pink actually makes you up to 35% physically weaker for half an hour. So Norwich City Football Club took this idea and decided to paint their away changing rooms in this pink, and they got promoted. So they were playing a team who were 35% physically weaker for most of the game, and then it got banned. And this is why now when you look at goalkeepers in football or any other sport, they'll all be wearing bright, colourful, scary wavelengths that throw you off when you're about to try and score the winner. Just to put it in perspective as well, this is obviously a dramatic example, but this is just a wavelength. So we have these responses to wavelengths. By not creating or mimicking the wavelengths found in natural light, you are just turning down all those potentially awesome feelings or responses that you get to an environment. So distribution and flicker. So in the natural world, you don't really get anything there's a general luminance of an average of 50% in a space. So what that means is the difference between the brightest and darkest point in a space is about 50%. So here, very, very dark and then very, very light. In care homes, this is one of the biggest risk areas, and actually they put a lot of protective things in place to make sure that there's a very even illumination scheme in care homes. The reason being, your eye is controlled by 6 muscles, and they sort of pull and push at different areas to move your eye and contract your pupils. If you're going from a very dark patch to a very light patch, your pupils have to dilate or contract very, very quickly. As you get older, those muscles weaken. So in care homes, if you're going from a dark spot to a light spot, your eye really struggles to adapt. and as a result you fall, and then, you know, bad news. So very important to make sure that there's an average difference of about 50% brightness in a space. The other thing, this little brain on the right, is to do with flicker. So I was saying this is the devil's work, and there's a reason for it. So LEDs can't dim down. They either turn on or off. So the way in which you perceive flicker, or the way you create flicker as a lighting manufacturer, is by turning the LED on and off very, very quickly, and overall less light is created. So what you may have found, I'm sure you've seen this before, you take a mobile phone, get the video out, start trying to send a video of something funny that's happened on TV or in a club, and you see all the lights on your phone blinking and flashing. That's actually what they're doing in real life. But your brain takes what are called saccades, tiny little photos. So every second they're taking 20 photos. You can actually see these when you look at someone's eye when they're moving slowly from left to right. The eye doesn't gently go like that. It kind of goes duh, duh, duh. You may have seen it. But your brain works really hard to stitch those photographs together to create a really fluid transition of the world around you. If you were looking and your eyes were just going duh, 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 it'd be quite a scary experience of the world. So what your brain is doing is when you're looking at your phone, you're seeing the reality of that light creating a lot of flicker, and your brain is working overtime to remove that, to make sure that your experience of the space is fine and tranquil and calm. That takes a huge amount of energy away from you. So that's why 3 p.m. you reach for the Mars bar, a fourth coffee, all that kind of stuff, because you need a sugar hit just to get your energy levels going up to just support that crazy amount of work that it's doing. So there's now a new bit of legislation that has come in about non-flicker drivers. So we've been doing this for a couple of years, but basically we have non-flicker main stem and then DALI and all that kind of stuff. But flicker is the devil's work. So it's worth trying to remove it. There's if you remove flicker in schools in particular, there's like a 40% increase in speed and accuracy of children reading. So if you imagine that over a day, then a week, then a school year, then an entire educational lifetime, the difference can be absolutely huge. And all it takes is just making sure you've got decent drivers. So this is a slide all about apples. So there's a guy called Richard Gregory who wrote a book or a theory about the top-down processing model. So what that's all about is so sort of the modern understanding of how we understand the world around us, the psychology of seeing. So if you look at these objects and you were just using visual input, you'd only understand the shapes. You'd know that that apple on the left was a more rounded and larger version than that abomination on the right. So what Gregory argues is actually when we look at an object, we use all of our other senses to join in on what we're seeing to build a richer understanding of the world around us. So it's called the top-down processing model because the input that you get in from the top goes down and then starts combining with your smell, your taste. So if you then look at these apples, you can then understand what each one of them would sound like if you dropped it, what it would feel like if you touched it. I'd ask you to taste it, probably not. But the idea is, if we don't have enough wavelengths in a space, we're removing the ability to understand or grasp or even combine all our other senses to that object. So lower light quality, all your other senses suffer. So this is something which I find absolutely fascinating. A good friend of mine has actually got it. And it's the ability to cross your different senses with each other. So a lot of people, Pharrell Williams, obviously Kanye West claims that he's got this, but you can see sound and hear color. So a lot of artists will paint what they can hear on the airwaves and stuff. And it sounds like a crazy thing, but they did this experiment a while ago, and this is called Booba and Kiki. So they took these two shapes and they put them around to pretty much every culture and corner of the world and asked them to apply or assign a name and a color to each shape. So the one on the left generally is called Kiki because it's spiky and people associated light, bright colors with it. The one on the right is Booba because it's blobby and it's warmer colors. So what this sort of confirmed is that all of us have the ability to blend senses in some way. When we look at objects, we don't just see them, we're able to sort of understand the deeper smells, taste, sounds, and we associate different past experiences to the things we see. So you need the color in a space to lift every single part of your sensory system to a level where you can get the best out of an environment. So an example here as well, we're talking about how LEDs are pretty much made up of blue. So the first colors that you develop as a baby are, first you see in black and white, and then you develop the color red. That's the first color that you start to see in. And the belief is that when we were back in a tribe, one of the most important things to be able to do was to communicate through blood flow, to create strong social bonds in the tribe. You still do, to communicate through emotion. So seeing someone blush when they're embarrassed or fill up with rage, their whole face turns red. But it was really important to communicate. So again, you think about the color LEDs now, you've got a bright blue light that doesn't have any red in it, and it removes the ability to communicate. So just to show you how strong this ingrained system is, they did a study where they took 100 different faces and pixelated them out, and there was an 85% success rate of being able to understand the emotion that each face was portraying. So if we're thinking about the schools we're building, the houses we're living in, the hotels we're building, by putting in LEDs that don't have this red end of the spectrum, not only are we removing the ability to touch, feel, touch, smell, hear all the objects that are in the space, we're reducing the ability to communicate. We're reducing the ability to relate to one another, and it has a massive effect. So, we need to kind of think about where lighting came from. We started with fire, then it went to oil, then candles and gas, and this little cool one here as well, I think is a nightmare. I'm sure we've all been on building sites where that's just swinging in a loo and it just hits you in the eye with bright blue light. So the idea is trying to bring it back to natural light. So it sort of brings us off to the final section, which is, how do you design biophilically? Hopefully by now you sort of understand how deeply ingrained all these requirements are for us to live our best lives. And I made mention to it earlier, but Terrapin, which is an outfit made up by two industry legends, William Browning and Catherine O'Ryan. These are the principles that Google asked them to put together that are objectively improving performance and quality of life of human beings in all the Google offices that we know now and a lot of other places. So they can be broken down into 3 sections, and we'll go into each one. If anyone wants to talk to me a bit more about it at the end, do let me know. I mean, this could have gone on for way longer than it will. I want you to go and live your lives. So 3 sections. There's nature in the space. What sort of genuinely natural things are you putting into a space? Natural analogs, wherever possible. How are you creating those fractals? How are you creating those shapes and textures and materials and things that are found in nature? And then nature of the space. How have you laid out the space to make it feel comfortable? Something that we would have evolved around. So we will start, as all good things do, with the first one. So nature in the space. So there are sort of 7 components to nature in the space. And as I say, time is limited, but if you want to talk about it later on, we obviously can. So the first point is visual connection to nature. It's really important to try and look out at a starting point, out of windows towards nature. That's the most important. There's nothing that can beat nature, right? So just try and look at it as a first point. Non-visual connection with nature, so things like sounds, smells, touch, tastes. If you have sort of aromatherapy candles or something like that, that is biophilic design. It's creating natural emotions within yourself. Then non-rhythmic sensory stimuli, so birds chirping, branches in the breeze. This is the sort of, for me, this is always the point which I think can be overlooked, or at least I probably wouldn't think of. So having little birds chirping in the background, or as I say, branches swinging, natural movements that replicate things that nature would have had. Then you've got thermal and airflow variability. Think of the polar bear, needs it cold, not hot. What do you need individually? Presence of water, that's obviously a calming part. And then dynamic and diffuse light. So having light that mimics night and day, and is evenly distributed in a space in a way that is found in nature. And then you've got connection with natural systems, so a deeper awareness of a functioning ecosystem. So fog could also be natural rhythmic, non-rhythmic sensory stimuli, but also it does create sort of a continuation between inside and out, and it's sort of creating that sort of that flow through from from natural systems to artificial ones. So a couple of examples here. You've got natural objects, you've got water, you've got nice stone. A couple of these actually, because they've had to be put in portrait, they do have access to views outside. The one on the outside is a great example of that. But you know, a lot of you guys will all do this subconsciously anyway, because you're good designers, but it's an easy checklist just to make sure if you're trying to build an optimal space for humans, get these 15 points out and go, cool, we've done that, done that, done that. Oh, no, we haven't done that. And it's just another layer of guaranteeing that those things will all work. And then natural analogs. So these are all the shapes, textures, and colors that we experience in the world around us. And you'll often find these in religious buildings. So where you try and create sort of awe and wonder, and we'll come on to that in a moment. But by creating natural shapes, patterns, using materials that are natural, you know, instead of just doing an artificial round color that's flat and unimaginative, do something that's sort of textured, or a natural olive green, shapes that aren't straight, try and use curved objects. I mean, no object in nature really is straight. Everything is slightly kinked and curved, so it's bizarre that we build, it's the most efficient way of building rooms and stuff, but try and create some curvature and some interesting natural shapes. And then complexity and order. So when you're doing a mood board and you see that there's, you know, 10 different types of wood, different brasses and coppers, but somehow they all kind of work together, that's the thing that you'll find in nature. Imagine being in a woodland. You see so many different varieties of trees, but the layers and the tones are all synchronized in a way that makes you understand that they are homogeneous and cohesive and that they work. So this is one of my favorite images in Terrapin's book. So you can see there's all kinds of things going out here. You've got nature in the space, you've got, you know, vision to outside, and these chairs mimic the shape of the mountain behind it. So it's sort of that complexity and order. You've got that continuation of natural systems trying to create a sort of a mirror image of the outside and the in. You've got the presence of water, the sound of which will be non-rhythmic sensory systems. You know, you've got this stepping stone, and they haven't just got straight slats of wood. You've got the texturing that's been kept there, creating more complexity in the back of the brain. You've got natural materials and shapes, and everything there is biophilic. So it's easier sometimes, as I said, but I don't want to keep you guys too long. So nature of the space. So this is the layout. So there's a belief, it's called the Savannah principle, that the scenario in which human beings feel most comfortable is in the plains of the savannah. So tall trees, low bushes where you can sort of hide, wide open landscapes, so you can see predators, but also shelter prospects. So that is more or less what buildings in terms of layout and structure should have. So prospects, the ability to see wide open areas. You're not sort of in a, you know, imagine Harry Potter in his cupboard, not great. You kind of want to be able to see miles out and have that ability to feel like you're in control of the environment around you. Refuge, you want those safe spaces. You want to be able to find refuge and safety. So particularly in big open offices, one of the biggest issues is you have these rows of desks that are all facing the wrong way, not looking out of a window. You don't really have a low drop ceiling where you can just sit and feel like you've got a little bit of view time. So you need those refuge areas. Mystery. So yeah, we'll show you on the next slide sort of what that means. And then risk, peril, and awe. So these are three that were introduced sort of slightly later that have been proved to sort of excite or make curious the human mind, which again improves enjoyment of a space. So this is a Foster and Partners project where a lot of these are in place. So mystery and storytelling. I mean, you've got fish on a wall, which isn't exactly normal, but it makes sense. It's complexity and order. You've got this beautiful sort of water running on the outside. So they do tie together. Dynamic and diffuse lighting as well on the wall. But interestingly, the part on the right-hand side of this image is a vast open cylindrical structure. And you've got, you know, walking underneath that, although it could be, you know, create some awe, it's slightly terrifying. So being under this little prospect or refuge area on the left, this walkway, by being curved as well, it creates a little bit of mystery. You're not quite sure what's around the corner, so it's intriguing. That's one of the biggest sort of examples of mystery that can be easily used, is actually curving pathways and corridors in buildings and offices. It allows you to create a little bit of mystery, but also it's a natural shape. You don't want giant straight lines because it's not found in nature. It's nice to have that little arc. This is a project that we've done, which is, again, you've got dynamic diffuse lighting. You've got shapes which are curved. You can see the joists are sort of curving round from top to bottom. You've got refuge areas, fire, non-rhythmic sensory systems. You've got those flickering flames and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, like I say, there's a lot of all these things in each photo. If you take all 15 principles and just checklist them, you'll end up with a project that is biophilic, which for me is pretty cool. So there's one point, I guess, which, although there's a mention of dynamic and diffuse lighting, this whole list of considerations to create a great space doesn't take into account our visual evolution. Doesn't talk about this new technology that we've got. You can tick every single one of the 15 principles off, but if you've got a bright blue light that's not natural in shape and everything else is, and it's not in the right places and isn't harmonizable, then you're kind of removing all of those other biophilic principles that you've got. So my argument is actually, and I've actually been Zoom calling Bill Browning, I think he's sick of me now, but about how there should be a 16th principle, and it is modern technology and the new lighting that is available to us, because it can completely ruin a project. So that's where I come on to us. We sort of, I guess intuitively, like a lot of us, we know what feels right and what products look good and which finishes are good to have. But as we've looked more into this over the last sort of 3-4 years, we've worked out that it is just hardcore science. The facts are that the products and finishes and stuff can be made to act as an extra vessel or tool in line with these 16 principles. So spectrum, we have the closest thing to natural light anywhere in the industry, which means that all of those wavelengths are going to be popping out and replicating light in a way that is natural. So this is a graph. The black line is sunlight. We are literally, I think it's something like 3-4% or something away from perfect sunlight, which is pretty awesome. So you can see every single wavelength there. This is sort of a 98 CRI, which is not us, but this one here is hitting sort of 90, 93, 94, 95, 96 in pretty much every variable. Tunable white as well, so we can do tunable. Dim to warm as well, which is similar, but just on a rotary dimmer. You don't need sort of a whole load of complex wiring, which makes it a very approachable thing to be able to add it into your projects. We've got an industry-leading range of finishes, and I think we're the only people who can do proper biophilic, organic, aged materials. So we can do any powder coat, anodize in any finish, plate in any finish, and yeah, really, really biophilic fractals. All of our objects are shaped very naturally, so even our frames and stuff are sort of biomorphic. They sort of look like spider's webs. We've got the Auber on the right there, which is, we believe, the only sort of circular fitting in the industry. Really, really modular as well. So all of our products, you can completely customize them down to the very last detail. We've got a new configurator on the website, which I'll show you in a minute as well, where you can create a completely custom fitting, and we've got all these accessories which can be popped in before or after. So what that means in the context of design is that when you've done a perfect layout, but then you realize that the client still hasn't worked out what piece of artwork they're putting on that wall, which always happens, you can add a honeycomb, a softening lens, you can put a color filter in, you can have up to 3 accessories at the same time. So, again, we're able to offer homogeneous, even lighting, even after the lights have gone in. So we're B Corp certified as well. I think us and Stone Lighting are the only two people in the industry that actually are. We make everything that we can in the UK. I think like 96% or something of our stuff is made in the UK, which is the only way you can actually get B Corp certification, because we genuinely do. As of this morning, my dad told me, we are now off-grid completely. We've got solar panels on our office roofs. We're now giving back to the grid, which is quite cool. And we have a circular regeneration thing, so 87% of the fittings that are returned to us are repaired rather than just skipped. And then everything that is not repairable, if it's been wired to mains and the chip is completely in 150,000 pieces, then we'll take what's left of the PCB and put it in a recyclable bin and make sure everything's sort of responsible. So this is our core range. We do I mean, you guys have to remember so many different names for different products. So to keep it very simple, we do downlights, uplights, spotlights, track lights, low-level wall lights, and they're available in small, medium, or large. Simple, right? Then we do LED strip, which is exactly the same, small, medium, or high output. But again, they're also the smallest, most powerful relative to size. So we get the power out of these fittings that the rest of the market gets out of these. So it means that our fittings will be the most discrete version of any product that you're putting into a space. And then you've got the customizability. Everything about them is polishable after installation to make sure that your project looks absolutely awesome. And then, yeah, small, medium, large, quite simple to remember, hopefully. So this one won the Dark Awards, the Enlightening Design Awards. This is our iconic, which has all these tiny little things here. That's our medium version as well, so you kind of get an idea of the scale. That can get down to about 20 mil in aperture. And then we have a larger one as well. We have the round and square oculars. So downstairs, yeah. So we got pizza after this as well for anyone that doesn't have to rush off. We can do a quick walk down to have a look at them. The Orba, which is our standalone product, which you can kind of see in here. Often they're sort of a bit Marmite, but for me, when you've got a sort of a tubular fitting, it's more invasive in a space, but these really tuck into the corners, and you'll see downstairs they're all finished in a specific RAL, and you just can't see them, hopefully. You'll definitely tell me you can, I hope you can. And then we have the Pano range. So this is our Pano adjustable uplight, which is the winner of the 2022 Dark Awards. I think it's 2021, but it got confusing explaining that, it was delayed. So 2022 Dark Awards. And then this has been shortlisted for an event next week, which we're hoping to win as well. So every part of our range has won an award. It's all made in the UK. And we're literally giving back electricity to the grid. Then we've got Track, Orba, or our Ocular, available in low voltage, mains voltage, basically flush, Kasambi, loads of different stuff. That's our Deca Track. So projects, so we do literally everything. Residential, hospitality, commercial. So this is our residential. We did 9 Elms, which is quite cool. Well, I think hopefully you guys have seen 9 Elms. Down to your snugs and all that kind of stuff. This is the Newt Hotel, which is quite a beautiful project. Enjoyed working on that. Hospitality, this is sort of, again, inside. I'll flick through these just so you can kind of get an idea. These are the Microsoft head offices we were talking about, and then hairdressers, Harry's in Northcote Road. Retail, we've done Fortnum and Masons, which is quite cool. And this is a tailor in Savile Row. And then we've got some marine as well. So mention the configurator as well. This is our new website where you can completely customize your product down to the very last detail. So you can build in real time the finishes. And then at the end, you can download every single spec sheet that you can possibly imagine to make sure that everyone on site, everyone who's ordering and everything knows exactly what's going on. Available pretty much everywhere except the USA, which we're going to try and crack next year. And then I'll sort of finish up with, we've got a video which, remember to do that. I'll let you guys just roll on. Cool. Well, guys, thank you so much for coming along. I know obviously a few people had to leave because we've got meetings and I know it's Thursday, but as you can tell, this is my complete passion project. So for you guys to let me have a little bit of a chance to talk about all this stuff that I've learned, hopefully you walk away with a few things yourselves. But yeah, thank you so much.